Welcome to the Firehorse Podcast, where we talk to B2B founders and leaders about their real life experiences and wisdom on building, selling, and scaling businesses, and gain insights into what actually works across sales, marketing, go-to-market strategy, and AI. Today, I'm joined by Ray Rike, founder and CEO of Benchmarkit, the largest B2B SaaS and AI-native software benchmarking company. Drawing on data from 25,000 companies, Ray also hosts the AI to ROI podcast, exploring how enterprises turn AI investment into measurable business value. He is also the co-author of the AI to ROI weekly newsletter. Ray, it's great to have you on. Welcome to the Firehorse podcast.
Emily, thank you so much. I was excited when you reached out and happy to be here with you and your audience.
We're very happy to have you here. So, before we get into it, can you please give us a quick overview of Benchmarkit and what made you decide to build it after 30 years in B2B software leadership?
Yeah, and that sounds like a long time, but it's especially long since I've always been in software companies that had a recurring revenue model right out of undergrad. I worked at a almost billion-dollar entity that was the world's largest provider of hosted applications hosted on mainframes across the world in our global data centers. And it really taught me, and that was a division of GE, and it taught me the importance of understanding how you're performing against your peer group. And one of the challenges I had as I went to Silicon Valley, when I tried to look for benchmarks on how my like company peer group was running go-to-market organizations and what the benchmarks were, I realized very quickly that they were never contextualized. So I wanted to create the industry's first benchmarking company that has contextualized benchmarks so the operators could see your net revenue retention or CAC payback period or other metrics like that in benchmarks based upon like company size, like company annual contract value, like company pricing model, like company funding sources. So that was the goal I set out on over 5 years ago.
Wow. And Benchmarkit has now run over 50 benchmarking research programs and collected data from 25,000 plus B2B software companies. What's been the biggest surprise in what that data actually shows once you have it at that scale?
Yeah, well, first of all, I need to thank my partners because we'd have never been able to do it without that. We partner with companies like Gainsight to conduct the annual Customer Success Benchmarking Index. We have our SaaS and AI financial performance metrics that we've partnered with almost every major Office of Finance platform from Sage, NetSuite, Abacum, Dual Entry, you name them. But one of the things I found is when you're conducting primarily survey-based benchmarking research, it requires scale to identify and eliminate the noise from outliers. So by having the level of scale we've been able to achieve, we've kind of decreased the statistical irregularities of survey-based research. So that has allowed us to compress a standard deviation, and it provides the users of our benchmarks a more statistically solid and high integrity benchmark based upon survey data. Now, on the flip side, I also found that collecting data through surveys, you can have inconsistency of the way a metric is calculated, something as simple as the CAC payback period, which is why I founded the SaaS Metric Standards Board almost 4 years ago to create the industry's first standard-setting body for the core metrics that were used in B2B SaaS. And I'm pursuing a similar path now for B2B AI native software companies.
Amazing. Now, you talk a lot about AI to ROI. What do you think is the biggest myth executives believe about what AI is actually delivering financially right now versus what's hype?
You know, Emily, I want to couch this as we are still in the very early stage of AI software deployments. Now, the early stage from the time, ChatGPT was launched in November of 22, I can't believe it's getting close to 4 years. The majority of the benefit has accrued to the individual user, and they have achieved individual productivity improvements. I can complete a task in less time, or I can conduct more tasks in the same amount of time, so more output. But in the majority of these use cases, the majority, that personal productivity impact has not been translated into financial performance increase that you can see on an income statement, things like reduced cost or increased revenue. So the biggest kind of frustration for many as CFO out there that have seen their chat GPT, Anthropic, and token cost increase is it's not being reflected in a better income statement. Now, part of that, Emily, is due to every innovative technology phase that we've implemented. It's called the solo paradox. And it's where, and Robert Solow kind of wrote this originally in 1987 and said, you can see the computer age everywhere except in the productivity statistics and income statements. So the core observation I'm seeing right now is even though we're gaining increased personal productivity from AI tools, that's not being translated to the broader department and you're being reflected in reduced costs per unit of output.
Okay, interesting. One of the very first decisions a founder has to get right is their go to market motion, sales led versus product led. Why does that decision matter so much, especially in that first $1 million of revenue?
Yeah. This became a passion of mine, 5, 6 years ago when everyone was talking about product led growth. And that was the go to market motion of the future. And the key is it may be based upon that founder really understanding their core ideal customer profile and buyer persona, right? I'll go back to Atlassian, right? 15-year-old company. They realized who their customer was. It was an individual contributor or manager of a development team or project management team. And they wanted to collaborate better with their peer group. So it was the perfect model for a product led growth motion where 3 or 4 developers use it or 3 or 4 people on the team use it, and then they recommend it to their colleagues so they can collaborate. Right. That meant I understand who my buyer is. It's an individual contributor who wants to collaborate with his or her own peers. So I'm going to go with the PLG motion. So that's an example. And we'll talk about pricing in a minute. But beyond that, kind of what's the right go to market motion is it working, Emily? And one of the people that I follow is Mark Roberge. And Mark Roberge is the founder of Stage 2 Capital. He also wrote this kind of research based book called The Science of Scaling. And he's got 2 metrics. And Emily, you're going to notice I bring a lot of things back to metrics here. But to say, is your go to market motion actually resulting in product market fit and then go to market fit? So, question, Emily, is how do you think most founders and entrepreneurs are measuring product market fit? It's qualitative, often subjective, right? But there's a mathematical formula. I call it the PET metric, but this came from Mark Roberge in The Science of Scaling, is when P% of customers complete an event every X period of time. So P%, E event, T time. So an example would be something like DocuSign. What percent of our customers actually completed and sent a contract envelope every 30 days, right? You can start to benchmark that and say, oh, if they send 20, 50, 100 of those every 30 days, and 50% or more of my customers do it, you've got product market fit. And then go to market fit is really about the efficiency of your customer acquisition motion. And the formula there is number of opportunities that you're working on times the win rate times the average annual contract value and divide that by your sales cycle time. And you really want to see if that's improving over time. So 2 formulas to really prove that your go to market motion is actually working as measured by product market fit and go to market fit.
Okay. And you mentioned price. What do most early stage founders get wrong about pricing strategy, and how should it connect back to the go to market motion that they've chosen?
Well, I always sold and ran organizations and who sold to enterprise or mid market. So, what our investors wanted to see was, can you get larger companies to pay you a heck of a lot of money for your product? So, we went from 50,000 ACV to how do we get to 100? How do we get to 250? So, now that creates a lot of friction. So, you don't have the same velocity of if you use a Uber land and expand model. So, one of the things I think is great with today's usage based pricing model is if you're using a PLG model, you want to make it very low friction for someone to try it, the classic freemium or entry level product. And those go together really well. Now, if you're doing a sales led motion, you may still decide that logo acquisition is most important. So I go in with a lower subscription, but then I actually have resources dedicated to increasing the usage and thus the variable revenue from that consumption based pricing. So the key is what's most important to your company and your category. Is it logo acquisition and expansion revenue growth over the first 6, 12, 18 months? Or is it really showing that you're getting enough revenue to cover your go to market costs right up front? So those are kind of two different vectors I would look at.
Go to market and pricing obviously come back to a very granular ICP and a clear value proposition. How do you help a company get specific about who they're really selling to and why?
Yeah. Well, here's what I've done as an operator, and we recommend to a lot of our clients, and that is long term. When I say long term, 12 to 36 months after you acquire your first few customers, your gross revenue retention and or your logo retention, if it's a lower ACV product, that's a key metric to know if you've got great product market fit in that ICP you're targeting. Because if they continue to renew and stay as customers, pretty sure you've got a granular ICP. Now, in the short term, though, one of the things that I really like to look at is what's the velocity of customer acquisition and what percentage of those are hitting an aha moment, the high value moment. Some people call this the activation rate. The more of your customers that are hitting that activation point and say, aha, I see the value here, that typically is highly correlated to retention and overall expansion over time.
One stat that really stands out from your benchmarking data: mature SaaS companies over $250 million tend to see around 300K of ARR per employee. But AI native software companies are hitting closer to $1 million. What's driving that gap, and how should traditional SaaS leaders be thinking about it?
Yeah, I think we need to be careful here a little bit, Emily. And that is, I mean, that's the trend. And if you look at publicly traded SaaS companies, their average ARR per employee is closer to 400,000. And that's increased about 35% over the last 3 years. So getting much more productive. Now, AI native companies, they've really been able to capitalize upon both an amazing phenomenon trend around the excitement of AI in a lot of experimental budgets. So you've had companies like Lovable, right? They got to like 2 million to $3 million per FTE in their first 18 months, right? They're the fastest company ever to $100 million. But I don't know how much of that is based upon this experimental and phase of adoption and whether it will be lasting over time. Now, what I do know when I look at a lot of the fastest scaling AI native companies, they've changed that go to market motion playbook. And a lot of this, and I'll go back to Lovable, was around social, community, and user referrals. They just built this amazing community of excitement around what their users were doing with Lovable, and they would share it with their friends and their friends. So I'm seeing a lot more lower cost, customer centric demand generation efforts than your traditional SDR or marketing. So that's one of the differences. But once again, let me be very clear. We are in a high experimental budget customer spend phase today. And I'm not sure if we're going to continue to see the same level of velocity. But what I do know is I think $1 million per FTE will become the new benchmark over the next 2 to 5 years.
Wildcard question for you. Outside of Benchmarkit, what's something about your path that people wouldn't expect?
Well, I am a US citizen, and there's a lot of talk about, is the American dream still possible? So, number one, I grew up in a very poor rural area of Ohio on a small farm. I was adopted at 1 week old, so I didn't know my birth parents. And I was reunited with both of my birth parents about 5 years ago. So, I think the reason I say that is I found that really provided me unique insights into the value of nurture versus nature. And I don't think anyone's kind of entry into this world limits them from achieving based upon their pure will, persistence, and desire to have more. I think Harry Stebbings, right, is another perfect example of that, right? At 18 years old, he didn't have any real connections, and now he's running one of the most powerful VCs in Europe and has an amazing video media company with his 20 VC podcast.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear about you and also very impactful in where you are and how that's shaped the man you are today. So, if people want to find out more about Benchmarkit or follow AI to ROI or find the book, where's the best place for them to go?
I'd like to encourage everyone to just follow me, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm at Ray Rike. By the way, Emily, another small fact, I was user number 256 on LinkedIn because a good friend of mine was the co-founder. So been there for a long time.
Wow.
People can also visit benchmarkit.ai. That's benchmarkit IT, so benchmarkit.ai. And all the benchmarking research we do is free. It's non-gated, and it's available both in a hard copy report, but also in an interactive benchmarking platform, which allows you as an entrepreneur or a B2B software operator to see how a particular metrics benchmark measures up to companies just like yours based upon company size, ACV, etc.
Awesome. How about the book and the podcast?
So the AI to ROI podcast is available on your favorite podcasting app. I also, for over 2 years, did the Metrics Brothers podcast with Dave Kellogg. Dave Kellogg is an OG in the kind of B2B SaaS industry. So you can still listen to our over 122 episodes. And then the AI to ROI newsletter is on Substack, and it's AI to number 2 ROI.substack.com.
Amazing. And I will drop those contact details and links below the video as well. Ray, this has been a genuinely insightful conversation, especially hearing how data at scale changes the way founders should be thinking about go to market, pricing, and ICP. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you again next time.